Come on in, Shanna.
Thank you, Jay. Oh my gosh. What an intro. I love knowing that I'm someone's favorite. Oh, my name is Shanna Cheatwood, and through God's grace and mercy, strong sponsorship, the fellowship, the 12 steps, the literature, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since October 13th of 2008, and for that, I'm truly grateful. It is an honor and privilege always to be asked to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous, despite how I feel about it sometimes. To think that I could be given the opportunity for my dark past to become my greatest asset, and that is the very thing that makes me most useful. I mean, the healing that comes from that. Not only am I not drinking, but to think that can be shared so that another person isn't alone in the world anymore is unfathomable to me, because who am I, In fact, that's been my biggest concern my whole life from the time I believe I could probably talk or walk is constantly thinking about me. So, and then I found a drink, and I found that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop once I started. But that feeling of ease and comfort that comes when I'm all of a sudden put in a position in my mind after having a few drinks, that ease and comfort where I'm not thinking about me so much. If I'm able to be around people and not hate them or not be so scared of them. And the point is I'm just really not thinking about me when that switch gets turned off, but by just a few drinks. The problem is I can't stop once I get to that few drinks because it tastes better. It goes down quicker, easier, harder, faster. And I thought I was actually choosing to drink that way. But come to find out, I was actually drinking because I was trying to overcome a mental craving beyond my control. I had no idea. But those are the kinds of things that I learned when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was someone telling her story one night that was able to get up at a podium and basically unzip her heart and share all of the things that she had at one point been so ashamed of, fearlessly, or at least she looked fearless to me anyway, all in an effort to try to help someone else feel as though they're not alone in the world anymore. And I wanted whatever it was that she had that enabled her to get up and share that stuff. Because I was always good at well, I don't know that I was necessarily good at it. At least I thought I was good at it. Whether good at it or not, my attempt was always to make you think I'm okay. And as long as you thought I am okay, then I must be okay. I had no other platform on which to be secure. I needed you to think I was okay all the time. And not even just okay, I needed to be your favorite all the time. I needed to be the favorite. Who knew that I could actually be a favorite of somebody? I love it. I love it. Thank you, Jay, for the opportunity. Um, Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for showing up. Regardless of the reason you're here. I was in my home group meeting this morning. I do have like I said, I have a sponsor, and my sponsor has a sponsor. My sponsor, who I love so much, she has been absolutely instrumental in my life. And she is the great Polly P. And I get the opportunity on Monday to fly down and visit her in Jacksonville. She is right now at the Florida State Convention, having a bunch of fun with so many people, enjoying her second chance at life. And I want to be like that when I grow up, I want to be constantly thinking of others and how I may help meet their needs. And that's what she does. And she always would say, there is a God of my understanding interrupted my life without my permission and set me on my feet and gave me another chance. And I can identify with that too. My home group is the Saturday morning Big Book Study meeting in Knoxville, Tennessee at the Park 40 Club. If you're ever in town, it meets at 9:30 in the morning. It's a packed meeting. Big Book Study, would love to have you. I sponsor women as well. I met with Sponsee this morning when we were going through the big book, steps 10, 11, and 12. I take what is called 10-step calls if you want to be pretty, I guess, literal about it. In other words, my phone is open for those who need somebody to talk to and may need to see a different perspective other than their own and be directed back to a power that can solve their problem. That's what my sponsor does for me. Just a little bit of brief stuff about me. I grew up in a small town just about, 30 miles west on I-40 of Knoxville called Kingston. This meeting is out of Kingsport, which is kind of north east of Knoxville, and that's where the Appalachian Regional Roundup is held. Wonderful, wonderful roundup. I haven't gone to yet, but I want to one day. But anyway, I grew up there. I grew up I had a broken home. I had a difficult life. I did. It wasn't the worst. It certainly wasn't the best, but it wasn't that great. I had a lot of turmoil. Not gonna kid myself about that. Did the people who raised me, my mom and dad and step parents and grandparents and stuff, intend to create a lot of fear? No, they didn't. They did the best they could. I've learned that through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I do always remember being always afraid. I had a what I now know is an alcoholic father. And he was abusive at times, and he cut and ran on me after my mom divorced him. And my mom divorced him not long after. She stumbled upon him after going to the grocery store, beating me pretty badly to the point where I collapsed and wet myself and all of that great stuff, because he was someone who, when he wasn't drinking, he was rageful. I had done something that a 5 or 6 year old little girl does, which is probably disobey. And he lost it and did what he does and did. Mom found him and pulled him off of me. And it wasn't long after that she and him divorced. And it turns out right around that time, my mom was actually seeing someone else. So she was having an affair anyway. And so from that point on, I had revolving door stepdads. My mom left my dad, married a guy who was abusive to her, and then she left him and she ended up marrying another guy who was good, but basically for financial security. By the time I was 11 years old, this wonderful man took it upon himself to adopt me and my sister. He was the closest thing to a decent father I'd had my whole life. And by that time, I was so closed off, I didn't care. I did not know how to care about a parent. I didn't know. I was too scared to. By the time I was early adolescent, I had 2 of my houses burned down. My mom had actually, I believe, burnt those houses down for insurance money. I was moved from one school to the next, and all of the things. And I thought that was normal. And I remember by the time I had gotten to high school, I had 5 different father figures. The last man she ended up marrying was the one that swept her off her feet and told her everything she needed to hear. And by that time, I was just waiting for that one to end and on another guy to come. When she decided to marry this guy, she moved down to Georgia, and I moved in with my grandmother from the time I was a sophomore until I was a senior in high school. And when I was a senior in high school, she had decided to leave him again. And by this time, she left him because he was abusive to her. And by this time, he was stalking her, sending her doing all of the things that abusers do. and she was terrified of him, wanted to leave him, but she couldn't. And but that said, I also, all through high school, found that if I could just be perfect and make sure that you all knew I was okay, and you all didn't know what I had going on at home with my crazy stuff, and my sister, who was the opposite of me, and she did what she had to do, what had felt like she had to do to survive as well. She was the opposite. She got it. She was the one that was in all the trouble. She was the one who kept the focus off of me. And if I just stayed and kept my nose clean and kept my grades up and kept everything looking good, then my mom wasn't paying attention to me. And I needed it to be that way because I absolutely had no idea how to deal with the drama in my house. So I was in church every time the doors were open all through high school. I had the athletic boyfriend. By the time I graduated high school, I was homecoming queen. I was the honor student. I was the senior superlative in every category. I was nominated for, you name it, president of the Latin Club, all of it. And I'm not saying all of these things like braggy. I'm saying that oh, and I was a star basketball player being offered scholarships to colleges and things like that. I had become everything a lot of people said they wanted to be, but on the inside there, it was just me against you. I was the fearful and scared little person that looked good, but terrified. I had a weight problem. I developed an eating disorder in middle school. But I always had a weight problem when I was little, even from the time I was little. And my parents constantly were on me about what I ate and what I didn't eat and everything. If you would be so pretty, if you just lost weight, you would be so pretty, and no boys are going to like you if you keep eating and eating and eating, and like a, whatever. And so I was the one that was hiding the food and all this stuff. Anyway, so I developed that. And then also I had in sixth grade a teacher that relentlessly made fun of me for my weight in sixth grade in front of all the other kids. And what's interesting about that is in fifth grade, prior to that, oh, I was a bully. Believe it or not, I was actually a very bad bully in fifth grade, and I relentlessly bullied the new girl who had moved into our class. And the following year, when I was being bullied by my teacher, and I didn't have a friend in the world, the one girl who was my friend was the one I'd bullied the year prior. And so looking back through inventory and through prayer and all of the things, the benefits of being a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous and getting access to and maintaining that connection with the God of my understanding is I can look back and see how the God of my understanding was showing up my whole life before I even realized it. And I look back now and I see that that little girl was the God of my understanding showing up, showing me unconditional love despite the pain I had caused her. And so after that, interestingly enough, I was never someone who ever picked on anybody. And I think what ended up happening is I became someone, unbeknownst to me, that was always kind to people. And maybe it worked. Maybe that's why people liked me. I don't know. But I do remember picking up my first drink at age 14 because I wanted to be accepted so bad. I had the popular girl, most popular girl in school was having a sleepover at my house. And I didn't know how to like tell her no or whatever, but she wanted to get into the liquor cabinet while the parents were, mom or whatever was gone. And so we did. And we poured a big glass of whatever liquor we had. It was a mix of junk. And we ended up getting in the hot tub and I drank that. And it was like someone in a meeting had said when she started drinking, she instinctively knew that she was supposed to chug it. And I can identify with that because the minute I put that to my lips, I knew I was supposed to chug it. I got drunk. It was the best feeling I ever had in my entire life. All of a sudden, the voices calmed and I was able to breathe. I could relax and take it easy. I laughed. I laughed. I wasn't afraid anymore in that moment. I thought to myself, my God, no wonder people do this. But I woke up the next morning, I'm throwing up, I'm miserable, and I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And also, despite the craziness of my mom, she was a very strict mom, and if I ever got into trouble, I knew that I would be grounded and never be able to leave the house, and that meant I would be stuck at home in the drama. So I never did it again all through high school. And so by the time I graduated from high school and went to college, I decided that I didn't want to go to community college where I was offered a basketball scholarship. I wanted to go to the University of Tennessee. And so that's what I did. I had every reason to be hopeful. I was a good student. I was prepared. I was excited. I wasn't going to be the partier. Not me, not me. But then once I get there, that first week or so that I'm there, the desire to fit in and that need to belong kicks in, and they pull out the booze in the dorm, and I start drinking. I instinctively know I'm supposed to chug it again, and I drink it, and that feeling came back, and all of a sudden, I could breathe again. Only this time it was worse. We went out to the strip there in Knoxville on the University of Tennessee campus, and I'm drinking so much I can't. I'm inhaling the drinks, and I'm passed out within an hour and a half. And they drag me back to the dorm. They finish going out, but after a couple of hours, I end up throwing up, and absolutely cannot believe I'd felt so bad. And I said, I'm never doing this again, and gave it about another 8 hours, and Tennessee was playing Georgia. And I'm like, okay, let's try this again. Because all I could think about was what alcohol did for me rather than what it did to me. I forget. And that became a cycle. Fast forward to the end of that first semester. By that time, I was living on promiscuity and booze. By the end of the second semester, I'd met the love of my life who drank more than I did. And so therefore, I didn't feel so bad about my own drinking. And we did the thing together. I flunked out of the University of Tennessee, moved back in with my mom, begged the community college that I rejected for the basketball scholarship because I was above that. They let me back in. I started school, and in October 13th, I was living with my mom on her dime, disrespecting every rule she had, didn't care. And on one October 13th of 1998, I wake up because I'm late and I'm living in untreated alcoholism. I don't know how to be on time. I'm in a rush, rushing off to class. She comes into the bathroom where I'm getting ready and asks me how her outfit looks. And I blow her off and I'm like, get out of my way. You look beautiful. You always do. It's all you care about. Just get away from me. And I start to run out the front door, and I hit the storm door, start to open it, and something inside me stops me and says, Shanna, tell your mother you love her. Because right then in that moment, she says, Shanna, I love you. Be careful. And I stand there for what felt like an eternity. And I felt myself dig my heels in and my fists clench. Whatever is what I yelled back to her. Took off to class. After my first class, I get flagged down in the courtyard. Hey, come to the dean of students office. There was a policeman waiting on me. I thought, my God, what have I done now? I get in a police car. I get taken to the police station in Kingston there. And I'd never been in a police station before. But everybody I knew, it seemed like, was there. My brother walks around the corner, takes me into a little room. He says, sit down. And I said, what's going on? And he said, Larry shot your mom. He killed her. Her ex-husband that she was estranged from, her abusive husband that she was terrified of, waited for her to get to work, stayed in a motel across the street from her real estate office, waited in a Hardee's for her to arrive, walked in a suit and tie, carrying a briefcase and a 9mm, walks in and she guns her down like a dog. And that's the last words I said to my mother was, whatever. After she told me, I love you and be careful. That was October 13th of 2008. I was born on January 22nd of 1979, and she was born January 22nd of 1949. We were exactly 30 years apart. After that, I had no reason other than to drink and do whatever. And I had every single excuse. That was the excuse for every single bad thing I ever did from that point forward. Was my mother was murdered. My mother was murdered. Look at me. Look at the life I had. Okay. My life wasn't easy. No, but it didn't make me alcoholic. I didn't, I have since met so many people, and often, and even before then, and then even after being in Alcoholics Anonymous, there are a lot of people that have horrendous childhoods with all kinds of horrific things happening to them. And a lot of them are, many of them are not alcoholic. What separates me as someone who's bodily and mentally different from a normal drinker is the fact that when I put alcohol in my body, I develop a craving for more and more and more. And I also have this thing in my mind that says you can control it, despite the fact that you meant to control it last time you drank. You didn't. You're in all these positions because of you drink and you forget what happens. You're in blackouts. You do this, you do that, despite the promises you make to yourself. You have no control once you start. I forget that. I forget the pain and suffering that comes from just a week or a month ago. I'm without defense against that first drink. I didn't know that. I thought it was a moral failing. I thought it was a willpower thing. I thought it was because I had a bad childhood. I thought it was just a coping skill that I drank the way that I did. I thought I was choosing to drink the way that I did. When the fact is, I didn't have the power to be or do any different at all at that time at all. I was 100% hopeless apart from divine help. And that disease had started to progress. I believe personally from the time I was 14 when I took that first one. It just waited on me. And then when I got to college, it took off even more. And then it became a way of life for me. Everything I did centered around my drinking or, my husband. I ended up marrying him, that man that drank more than me. I met him New Year's Eve, and we did the military thing, and and he was all I had. He was all I had. I'm still married to him today. It's miraculous, and I love him more than I can ever imagine loving another human being. I met him at a time where I literally was at the darkest point of my life. And after my mother was murdered, he had left just days prior to that and gone on a military training thing in Oklahoma, where he would be in training for like 4 months or something. 3 days after he got there, he found out over a voicemail that my mom was killed, and he went to a chapel on the base there and because he didn't know what else to do. It was before cell phones. He couldn't call me. He couldn't do anything. And he said he knew from that point forward, he was put on this earth to take care of me. And I think at the deepest, darkest point in my life, looking back, I can see that it's quite possible that a God of my understanding was placing unconditional love in my life when I certainly did not deserve it. And it's not about deserving. That's just how good the God of my understanding that I've come to know is through working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The same God, for me, I believe, is the one who turned Bill W. around to that phone directory, and he made a call. And it ended up changing the lives of millions and millions and millions. And that's why I'm here alive today, to tell my little story. So my husband and I, we got married. We did the military thing. We had a couple of kids. I was off and on drinking. I quit drinking, was able to quit drinking for periods of time. We moved to Charleston, South Carolina, had our second child there. And by that time, I saw that I couldn't drink safely, but didn't know why. I thought I just needed to get my act together and start going back to church again, like I was raised and all of this stuff. I had no idea. So I did. I started going to church and I started praying, and all of a sudden things started happening. And I'm like, my God, is this what answers to prayer feel like? I'd tell the people in the Sunday school, like, this is what happened when I prayed. And they look at me like I have two heads. And I'm like, you're the religious people. You're supposed to know these things. Am I crazy? Keep going and going and going. We end up moving to a different area of Charleston. We move into this beautiful home. By this time, I am living in a beautiful home with a husband that makes plenty of money. We're young. I'm tan. I'm tall. I'm thin. I've got the minivan. I've got the boys, and I'm waking up every morning and want to blow my brains out. I didn't know I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. I was a miserable dry drunk, and all I could think about was how I was going to control my husband's drinking, get him to quit. Because, I'm white knuckling and I'm grabbing a hold of everything I can. And I can't drink because somebody's got to stay sober for these children, because I'm married to a man who's in the military, who's out of town all the time, in and out. He's a pilot, flies the C-17 in and out of the Gulf War. And I never know if I'm going to get a call, if he's going to be dead or alive. And then he comes home and all he does is drink. And I can't do it because somebody's got to stay sober for these damn children. And I swore to God I'd never end up like my alcoholic, abusive dad. And I meant that with all my heart, but I could feel it. I was so angry all the time, all the time. And I wanted to be a good mom, but I couldn't. All I could think about was strapping them in their high chairs, letting them sit there while I go outside and smoke a cigarette. Because I needed a break constantly. Just get the kids safe so I can just breathe. It was all I could do. And yet I'd go to church and I'd pray and I'd do all the things, and nothing was working. I tried medication. I tried psychology. I had tried religion. I tried physical fitness. I tried working. I tried not working. I tried a mother's morning out program to get me a break a couple of days, anything. And I wished for the end. I couldn't imagine my life with alcohol or without it. One of the last attempted drunks I had, I couldn't even get drunk. Had a babysitter and everything, went out with my brother-in-law, dreamt of recapturing the good old days. Started drinking. I could not drink and I could not get drunk. It was an awful feeling, awful. On Sullivan's Island there, just next to the Isle of Palms. It was one of the most miserable nights of my life. I was like, what am I going to do? And then I was just convinced that if my husband just quits drinking, then everything will be okay. And so what ended up happening, I ended up getting led to Al-Anon, because I had attended a recovery program that was based in a church that I had gone to. And really to refine the Mother's Morning Out program I needed, because I needed it. I needed a break from the kids. And so I went to check out that program. I got invited to that church and found out there was a recovery program there, whatever. And what ended up happening is one night, I hadn't gone to visit the church yet, but one night I was at home alone. My little boy, who was 5 or 6 years old, just like his mother at 5 or 6 years old, did something that a 5 or 6-year-old little boy does, which is disobey. And his unaware alcoholic mom loses her cool, grabs a little electric guitar toy, his favorite toy, out of his hands about this big, and in a rage to get his attention, breaks it over a leg into a million pieces. He screams in agony, says, "Mommy, why are you so mean?" And it cut me. And all I could say was, "I don't know." And I literally could feel myself collapse onto my knees right there in front of him. He's crying and screaming because he's so afraid. And I said, "My God, help me." I could see my alcoholic father. I could see myself. I could see the 2-liter Dr. Pepper rolling down the stairs when my mom came and pulled him off of me, because she had dropped the groceries and got him off of me. And I said, "My God, help me. What is wrong with me? What am I going to do? Help." Because I knew that if I told anyone what was going on in my head and in my heart, you either wouldn't care, or you would give me some other solution that I had already tried that didn't work, or you would lock me up in a mental institution, which in fact I almost welcomed that idea at that point. The next day I get up and I drag myself and that same little boy to the church that I was invited to. For some reason, I decided I'd go and visit. maybe this one will be it, right? We walk into this big, huge liturgical church, and I'm wanting to sit in the back. He's sitting next to me, and he's like, Mom, I want to sit up front. I want to sit up front. And I'm like, I don't want to sit up front. I don't want to be seen. He keeps on, and I'm like, you know what, God? I'm thinking to myself, F it, you know? I'm going to put my hand in this little boy's hand, and I'm going to end up where you have me. Just put me where you want me. I don't care. I give up. That little boy takes me to the front of this church. By the time I stand up and walk toward that front, everybody else sits down, and here I am. I'm walking in the high heels, clicking, center of attention again. And there just so happens to be two open seats right at the front. This place is packed, and there's two open seats right there. When we sit down, the church service starts, and I start bawling. I start crying. I have raccoon eyes from the makeup smear. The guy sitting next to me pokes me. Are you okay? Oh, yeah, I'm great. I'm dying. I wanted to kill myself before I walked in here. And you asked me if I'm okay. Sure, I got it. Because that's what I do. Because I'm convinced you don't give a crap about me. My mind has believed that. Anyway, church service ends. Because I'm in the front, I can't get out the back very fast. So I'm stuck around all these people who are interested in me and asking me how I'm doing. And I've got makeup, and they're like, do you love the service? And I'm like, oh yeah, it was great. And there was one guy that was sitting on that pew that looked me dead in the eye and said, do you believe God puts people in your life for a reason? And it's something about it, the whole situation. I was like, yeah, I think I do. And I couldn't explain it. It turns out that those people that I was put on that pew with were recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous. The woman who asked me, did you love the service? She was my first sponsor. And what's cool about her is that she was also in the other recovery program. I was so focused on my, fixing my husband. She hands me a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and says, here, read about your husband and his problem. And so I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going to read it. I'm going to figure out how to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I start reading this book, which describes alcoholism, not just drinking, but alcoholism. And it also describes what other family members go through when they love someone who drinks too much. And I'm thinking, this is what I need. But I start reading and I start learning about the physical allergy to alcohol. Once I start drinking it, I cannot guarantee you that I'm going to stop every time I want to and mean to. I didn't know that made me different. And I didn't know, and it describes the mental twist that preceded the first drink. Meaning, like, for instance, I can't tell you how many times I set out. Number one example that I can think of is I did not want to drink the night before I got married. That was the most important day of my life. And I knew that if I drank the night before, I probably wouldn't get married the next day. So I said, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And then all of a sudden, the night of my rehearsal dinner, the thought crosses my mind, oh, let's just go have a few drinks. After all, you're getting married tomorrow. Your bridesmaids will protect you. I'm already relying on other methods to make sure I'm okay, right? Because intuitively, I know I can't control it once I start. I didn't know that. Anyway, we go out to the bar, fully intending to be home by 10 o'clock because I have an 8 o'clock hair appointment the next day for my wedding. I get a few drinks in me, the allergy's triggered. My manifestation of the allergy is the craving for more. So I don't break out in hives. I break out in more alcohol drinking. Like, I crave more. That's the manifestation of that allergy. And that only happens to alcoholics, according to the doctor's opinion in the big book. And so once I started reading that stuff in this book, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm an alcoholic. And that sponsor of mine said, why don't you try some controlled drinking? And I'm like, really? Someone's giving me permission to drink. Long story short, I tried it. I tried it more than once. And on October 13th of 2008, 10-year anniversary of my mother's death, I picked up my final watch. because I tried the controlled drinking and I could not stop. It was a very uneventful bottom. It is so like my last drink was on the front porch of this house, and it was pretty pathetic, really. I wish I had a more dazzling story. That was it. I didn't plan it, but it just so happened to be the 10-year anniversary of my mom's death, and thank you, God, that hasn't changed. So we started working the steps. I remember asking her, well, how did you know you were an alcoholic? She said, I just couldn't stop at the buzz tipsy feeling every time I wanted to. And I understood what that meant at a gut level. So powerless over alcohol. Step one, can manage the decision to stay stopped or control it if I wanted to. Step two came to be willing to believe that a power greater than me could restore me to sanity. I became willing to believe this program could work for me too. I had tried absolutely everything. All I know is that girl was able to share her story fearlessly, be happy, and not drink. How the heck do you do that? So I was willing to believe this thing could work. That's about all I could do. And in step three, I made the promise to whatever God was out there. I don't know. My own conception at that time was enough to make a beginning, I was told. I had a mean and punishing God at that time, and I figured, well, at least if I work these steps, I'll get on his good side. I've come to realize that I have a kind and loving God. Then what's nothing more than to bless me and make me better and give me a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I have indeed received a life just like that I never thought possible. The first couple years of my recovery were some of the hardest things I ever had to walk through. Went through an awful, painful, most awful separation from my husband. I didn't know what I was doing. But God restored that and brought us back together. In step four, I did a personal inventory. Wrote down all the things, out of the big book, follow the directions. In step five, I was able to see my part in things. And then step 6 and 7 saw that I can't change even if I want to. It's the same as my drinking, powerless over what I had become. And I couldn't be any better apart from divine help. I needed a new way to live, and I needed power. And these steps have enabled me to find enough humility to tap into a power that has always been there my whole life. I just couldn't see it. That spiritual awakening happenings as the result of these steps, I could see the power of love and God in my life finally. And that alcoholic obsession has been removed. I'm able to go anywhere. I go to Las Vegas, go on vacations. I've got alcohol in my house. My beautiful husband still continues to drink. Turns out it's none of my business, and I can love him regardless. I am safe and protected as the result of finding that power greater than me that keeps me safe and protected. It is not me. If it depended on me, I would have been drunk or dead a long time ago. Step 8 and 9, I get the opportunity to make amends where I'd caused harm, and it's not about going back and making apologies. I had to surrender and allow the God of my understanding and be willing to follow directions and go back and repair the damage from my past the way it needed to be repaired, not how I thought it needed to be. And so one of the biggest resentments I had my whole life was the man who killed my mother, of course. What he did became a meal ticket for me. It gave me the attention I wanted and an excuse for every bad thing I ever did. And he did cause me more harm than I caused him. But nonetheless, I had to take the bit in my own teeth and look at my responsibility for how I treated him in that relationship, as hard as it was. What he did wasn't right. But I had to set that aside and look at me. And I was instructed to pray for him. So I started praying for this guy for quite a while. And all of a sudden, what ended up happening with me was I started seeing, you know what, maybe this little boy, this man was a little boy at one point and didn't mean to grow up to become a murdering criminal. Maybe that alcoholic father of yours grew up horribly. And come to find out just a few months ago, I found out that poor little boy at 13 years old got sent to an adult male prison for doing something very silly. He also had an abusive mother his dad died in Normandy. He had nothing. He was in an adult male prison from 13 until 19 years old. And the unimaginable happened. He had no way to live. He was a decent man who tried, but couldn't be any better. This program enabled me to see people from an entirely different perspective. And when I started praying for my mom's murderer, what ended up happening with me was, Shanna, how about all the times you drove drunk? How many mothers, daughters should you have killed? Did you mean to become what you became? No, I didn't. How about the fact that this man also started drinking again after a long period of dry drunkenness and started drinking again, and he did what he did. But for the grace of God, there go I. My disease hadn't progressed to the point his had. Am I willing to look at it like that? And I started praying with compassion. I started feeling bad for him. And so what ended up happening is I brought this to attention of my sponsor. I was instructed to write an honest letter. The letter said, Larry, I'm sorry you're in pain, because I couldn't imagine doing what I did, what it could have done to somebody, and living the rest of my life in prison like he was going to have to do, and never possibly be able to say I'm sorry to the people he had hurt. I can't imagine. So I sent him the letter. So I'm sorry you're in pain. I forgive you. A couple of weeks later, I received a letter back from him. I don't know if you can see from my camera. And a card. Turns out the day he received my letter, he was doing a devotional. The God of his understanding apparently is the same one I serve. I think God talked to both of us that day. But the devotional read, one thing, it was all about forgiveness. I don't want to eat up a lot of time. But his whole devotional was all about forgiveness, letting go of the past and trusting God. And this was the actual handwritten letter he wrote to me. He said, Dear Shanna, I received a note a few days ago, and I was really surprised to hear from you, but I was also happy that you had written. I do know that without God in your heart, no one could have done what you did, meaning write him that letter. And I'm so thankful you forgave me. I'm so sorry for what happened in the past. Thank you for your note and for your forgiveness. I hope you like the card and the text. He said the text was taken from one of the daily devotions, dated the day I received your note. So what I learned that day is, for me, and what I needed to learn for me so that I could let go, was that it's quite possible that the God of our understanding forgave him before my letter had even arrived. And that the God, if he can forgive that man, he could forgive me for what I'd done. And not only that, he used a murdering criminal to show me that the God consciousness of my belief had come to me, that this program was working. And it also gave me the opportunity to allow him to get free and to say he was sorry too. In setting him free, I was freed. I have no resentment toward the man. What he did was 100% absolutely and totally wrong, but that's between him and the God of his understanding. And guess what has happened? What he did was horrific, but God has turned that around. And every time I share this story, I get healing from it. Because other people can say, you know what, maybe if God can enable her to forgive that, maybe I can pray and become willing to forgive and let go of the resentment that's killing me right now. Whether you've got a day sober, whether you got 10 years, I don't know. I know that there are plenty of times when in my own recovery that I felt really alone in Alcoholics Anonymous, having worked the steps and having done it right. But thank you, God, for this process, that this program never ends. And we always get to grow. And that God of my understanding never fades. It gets more and more powerful the more humble I get. Every time I work a step, every time I share, every time I reach out to help someone else in the rooms. Got another amend that I want to share. I've had so many. I've had times where I'll pray for someone I hadn't seen in 10 years, that they'll come to my mind and I'll pray for them and ask God, how can I make that amend? They show up in the darn department store the day I pray about it, and I get to make amends right there in the store. I had the same thing happen in a gym, where I walked into a gym that I hadn't been in 10 years. I'm reminded of someone that I had harmed. I had done my amends homework. I pray about it. 3 days later, I walk in and she's there in the gym, and I make amends to her. We're friends now. In fact, she's my dermatologist. But my favorite one, the same little boy whose guitar I busted into a million pieces, who took my hand and led me to the recovered people of Alcoholics Anonymous, the boy I prayed for that night, God used to take me to the people who had the solution. He was getting ready to turn 16 years old. I'm living in Sarasota, Florida. That event keeps coming to my mind, keeps coming to my mind, keeps coming to my mind. I take it to my sponsor. This is an event I want to do. He doesn't even remember the event. The boy's never seen me drink, praise God. But I wanted to make it right somehow. My sponsor says, just keep praying about it. And so I did. And I asked him 3 days before his 16th birthday, honey, what would you like for your birthday? He goes, I'd like a brand new electric guitar. He didn't remember the incident. I said, you got to be kidding me right now. You absolutely, I will find a way to get you an electric guitar. God knew, I knew, my sponsor knew, y'all know. The spiritual realm is real. The fourth dimension of existence is what keeps me coming back. Life ain't worth living for someone like me who's given up alcohol. I can't imagine life without. I got to have something bigger, and I got it. I found it in Alcoholics Anonymous because I found real power. I found real love. I found a God that will enable me to make things right and make it a story so that others are helped as well. I was able to share this story with my son not too long ago, and he was blown away. He still has the guitar hanging on his wall. He's a member of a band. His friends are called Violet Courtyard. He went through a time where he was adamantly against all things God. But since he's come to his own understanding of God, and that's what the name Violet Courtyard means, is the presence of God. Violet is God, ultraviolet, royalty. He's an amazing human. And I get to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to be a sober mom. And for that, I'm truly grateful. My life is so awesome today. And it's all because of you all showing up. That's all I have to do is show up. I get to show up for my life today. That's all I have. Thank you for allowing me to share. You guys are absolutely phenomenal. I think I'll make it the rest of the night.